Mac Power Users, episode 532, BetterTouchTool. Hello and welcome back to Mac Power Users. My name is Stephen Hackett, and I'm joined as always by my co-host and friend, Mr. David Sparks.
Hello, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I can't help myself but be a little happy. We're making a Mac Power Users show about one app. Those are some of my favorite shows.
Mine too.
Let's just roll up our sleeves and dive deep. And this is one we've been threatening to make a show about for years. It's an app I use all the time, and I think we've hooked Stephen on it in the process of prepping the show, called BetterTouchTool.
Yeah, it's one of these tools that just makes your Mac way more powerful and flexible by harnessing your input devices. So we talked about Keyboard Maestro, and I have a question for you at the end of the show, kind of comparing the two. But this goes even further. You can use your trackpad, your mouse, all sorts of different input devices to make your Mac sing and dance.
I think, and I'm not sure of this, I think this started out as a touch tool, as the name implies, tool. Apple Apple started making better trackpads. Mm-hmm. They started adding gestures to them. So like if you do 4 fingers up, it goes one way. If you swipe 3 fingers to the right, it switches windows. And so they've got some basic gestures built in. A lot of listeners probably already know about that, but if you just go to the trackpad settings on your laptop, you'll see all the various options. If you get the Magic Trackpad for your iMac, you get the same things. But the idea behind BetterTouchTool, and I guess I should have asked the developer before we recorded, was, to improve upon that. What if we wanted to make it way better? But the thing that makes this app awesome is over the years, he has expanded the app to basically every input system that's ever been available on a Mac. They've got, MIDI controller.
Yeah.
We've got
the Siri remote.
the touch bar, the Magic Mouse, that has basically a touch-sensitive mouse where you can do things with it. So he's just continued to grow the app, not only with the types of input it can accept, but also the power that the app has. And it's really turned into a power user tool. One of the things we did was ask listeners how they're using BetterTouchTool in the forums, and we're going to talk about some of those uses at the end. And we've got some users that are just crushing it with BetterTouchTool.
Yeah, I was really encouraged looking through the forum, so many great ideas. And that's true with so many different automation systems, no matter what we're talking about. When you see how other people use them, it can spark ideas to resolve issues in your own workflow. And so we're going to share some of the things that we do. But I think even listening to the triggers and actions that we're going to talk through today, I hope that it will bring ideas to mind for the listeners, because tools like this are so open-ended and so powerful. Sometimes it can be a little overwhelming to start from nothing. But if you see someone solve a problem that's close to one that you have, it can encourage some creativity, and you can be on your way with a new automation in just a few minutes.
Yeah. The developer, I guess I'd call him a friend. I have an e-relationship with him. I email each other once every
Are we going with that word?
6 months or so.
I'm not sure I like that word.
Yeah, well, give me a better one, man.
I don't have one.
I never met the guy in person. We've emailed each other quite a bit over the years. So anyway, Andreas, good guy. I like this is another thing I like about this app. It's a passion project from a single developer. And he's, in the last year or two, I think he's managed to turn this into a gig where he's making his living selling this app. It's more than just something he does on the side, and which explains why the app has got a lot prettier and a lot more powerful over the last year. So I wrote him, told him we're going to do a show on it, and he was very happy about that, so much so that he gave a discount to users, to the Mac Power users. So it's $7.50 for a license, which is a steal. $21 for a lifetime license. It's also on SetApp, but you can get the app for 20% off with the code BTT_MPU. BetterTouchTool Mac Power users. BTT_MPU. Get your 20% off. Buy the lifetime one. Just go crazy.
Oh, yeah. This is such an inexpensive utility. He should charge more for this.
Yes, he should. He should, honestly.
Yeah, so the lifetime license receives all updates in BetterTouchTool's future, which is really cool. And any macOS apps that he releases during the 2 years following the purchase. So if he comes out with something new, you're grandfathered into that, which is really cool. You've really got to you got to do the lifetime. Anytime I see that on an app like this, that's what I want to do because I want the developer of this to be around for a long time, especially being an independent developer. That's a hard gig, and it is neat to be able to support that. So go check that out most definitely. And if you have Setapp, you can check it out. But then I still think you should throw your $21 his way.
Yeah, you can find it over at Folivora.ai, FOLIVORA.ai. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah, we've got links in the show notes, including that coupon code, so you can go find that and get it going on your Mac. So it's pretty sweet.
Yeah. So BetterTouchTool, it's a utility. It's in the vein of something like Hazel and Keyboard Maestro. I'd say not quite as expansive as Keyboard Maestro and kind of scratches a different itch than Hazel. But it's the focus is, as the name implies, the touchpad or the input mechanism to your computer. Because it's a utility, though, it's something once you start running it, you've got to open system preferences and give it lots of permissions.
Mm-hmm. And there's this great little touch when the app asks for permission. No, it tells you what to do, and then the window moves to the top left corner of the screen. So system preferences that comes up isn't behind it, which is like a little piece of polish that I really love. And it does a great job walking you through it. I think we've all been in that situation where you install an app and like you don't know why it doesn't work until you like go to system preferences, like, oh, it wanted this permission. BetterTouchTool does a really good job explaining what it needs, explaining why it needs it. And you're doing a bunch of automation on the Mac. Under Catalina, that means a lot of checkboxes and system preferences, but it does a good job walking you through it. Another thing that I absolutely love about BetterTouchTool is the documentation. It is so well laid out and so deep in terms of detail. Like every single Mac app I use, I want this sort of documentation for, because you could start at zero and read through this documentation and be in great shape to use this application. And I think it's a real lesson in how developers should do this sort of thing for their users.
Yeah, full of screenshots, very easy to understand descriptions, and even just the way it's laid out, it's very easy to get to what you might want.
And there's also a forum, so you can communicate with other BetterTouchTool users, just like Greg has with drafts, and like we have with Mac Power users. A place where you can ask questions, share workflows, and again, spark that creativity, solve a problem for somebody else. And in my time poking around that the last couple of weeks, it seems like a really solid community.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really, it's a utility app. Like so many of these automation tools, it's broken down with triggers and actions. What is your trigger? What's going to happen? With BetterTouchTool, the triggers are, they're related to your input devices. And we're going to go through those in detail in this show. But just for an example, what if you wanted to take 3 fingers and double tap the trackpad? That is a trigger. If you look at the Apple suggested gestures, that's not something that does anything with an Apple suggested gesture. But when you install BetterTouchTool, suddenly that 3-finger double tap, it couldn't be a possible trigger for you. And then you can turn that into something. And it's just great. A whole other thing it does, and we mentioned this on the David Wayne show a few weeks ago. I think that's what kind of got the seed planted to do this episode, is you can completely rewrite the touch bar to make it something useful to you.
Yeah. We're going to get into all the touch bar stuff it could do. It is really amazing how much you can customize that experience. Like you can totally throw away everything Apple does with it and build your own little, almost like your own little Stream Deck right there on your laptop.
Yeah, I like that.
I know you do. This episode of Mac Power Users is brought to you by Eero. Eero is the Wi-Fi that your home deserves, because every home should have fast, reliable Wi-Fi wherever and whenever you need it, because you deserve it. You shouldn't have to choose where you work in your home or what room you can stream something in because the Wi-Fi is bad. And Eero blankets your whole home in Wi-Fi reliability, so you don't have to deal with those sorts of issues. It eliminates poor coverage, dead spots, and buffering. With Eero, you will have a consistently strong signal wherever you need it. And for a limited time, Eero's mesh Wi-Fi system starts at just $79. So now is the time to upgrade your Wi-Fi system. It sets up in just a few minutes. It plugs right into your modem or router, and you manage everything from a dead simple iPhone app, which even lets you pause the Wi-Fi for dinner and alerts you if any device attempts to join your network. I've used Eero for several years in my house. The coverage is great, but that app really is the game changer. A lot of routers have really bad dashboards you have to log into in a browser on your desktop, and it's confusing. Eero takes all of that mystery out of it, and it's really easy to make changes, to tweak things on your network. For instance, we have a new iPad in the house because my kids are home, and I could very easily group it into the group of devices that have web filtering applied to them with just a couple of taps. With Eero, there'll be no more Netflix buffering in the bedroom, no more complaints of Xbox users with bad signal, and no more worrying that your security camera may drop offline. And it makes conference calls much easier as well. Eero has fixed my Wi-Fi woes. Let it fix yours. And you can have this fix as soon as tomorrow. Go to eero.com/MPU and enter the code MPU at checkout to get free overnight shipping on your order. That's eero.com/MPU and the code MPU at checkout to get Eero delivered with free overnight shipping. Our thanks to Eero for the support of this show and Relay FM. So let's talk about some of the triggers in BetterTouchTool. There's a lot of stuff here, and we're going to hit on the high points, but all of them have lots of options too. I really recommend people check this out and explore it because, we could talk for an hour just about what it can do with a Magic Trackpad. Right? There's so many options, but we want to hit the high points.
Yeah, and they've really the application really has evolved over the years. Earlier iterations, it would have the mouse and the trackpad at the top, so you could click on the icon for the device and then start making your triggers. The problem is it's grown so much. I think before we even get into the triggers, we have to cover what are all the input mechanisms. There's a lot of them. And so if you open the app interface, you've got a selection bar, you pick the app interface you want to work on, and then you've got triggers connected to those. And I guess the place to start would be the keyboard.
I think so. And what is neat about BetterTouchTool is that it can tell the difference between the right and left modifier keys. So for instance, if you wanted the left Command Shift I to do something, so the left command key, and you wanted the right command key Shift I to do something else, you can set that up. So you're not, by default, the Mac views both command keys and both option keys as basically the same thing. And by decoupling those, BetterTouchTool opens, basically twice the number of potential keyboard shortcuts, which is really, really neat.
Yeah. Yeah. And whoever uses the right modifier keys anyway, right? Do you ever use those?
No. I'm trying to think, maybe when I hit print, maybe I hit the right command key, but that's not very often.
Yeah. I feel like that's a real nice area there to create shortcut-based automation when you've got a set of keys that never get used, and now you can identify them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. But it's even smarter than that. So it can trigger on key up or key down. So do I want to start something when I hit the key or when I let go of it? So it gives you more options there. And even it can watch for key repeat. So you could set something up to if I just, for instance, just press the H key 3 times in a row, that could be a trigger. Probably not a very great one, but if you want it, it'll do it.
Yeah. SOS, type SOS, and your computer just shuts down and bursts into flames. Sends up a signal to the sky.
Sure. So the keyboard, I think, is where this most overlaps with other utilities. But from here on out, things start to get pretty wild.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't use BetterTouchTool for anything with a keyboard trigger. I do use keyboard actions with BetterTouchTool, where I do a trigger on a different, input device, and it types a keyboard shortcut for me. But I don't actually use it as a keyboard capture device.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
The first one, and the one that is most interesting to me, is probably the trackpad. If you've got a laptop, then you've got a trackpad. If you get the Magic Trackpad with your iMac, it really just changes the scope of what you can do with that device. And for someone who's a power user, it completely is a game changer.
Oh yeah, and this is not just tapping with two fingers. You can use up to four fingers on the mouse, up to five fingers on the Magic Trackpad, and it is tapping. It is deep force touching, whatever that's called this week. Tapping on one of my favorites is tap on the left side of the trackpad or tap on the right side of the trackpad. So you can combine all of these things. And what's cool about this is that you can build like a library of triggers that are all related. And if you just add a finger or do it on one side or the other, it do something different. And so again, like the keyboard, it's sort of taking one input and dividing it into multiple inputs. And because the Magic Trackpad in particular is so large, I have no trouble using a four-finger gesture or four-finger tap comfortably. I don't have to think about where my fingers are. I can just do it without paying much attention to it because the hardware allows for that, and the BetterTouchTool just unlocks it.
Yeah, and I'd like to go through just some of the gestures. I'm just looking at the 2-finger gestures, but they have these all the way through 5 fingers. So you can have the tap, double tap, or click, which is stuff that we already have been doing, and sometimes that may interfere with an existing one. But they also have the ability to pinch in or pinch out be a trigger, rotate right, rotate left, scroll up, or scroll up with a modifier key. So you could if you scroll up while holding down the right command key, something happens. And then there's a whole bunch of swipe gestures. So 2-finger swipe up, down, left, right. You can also swipe in from the top edge, bottom edge, left edge, or right edge. Now, that is a series of gestures available for all of these from 1 finger to 5 fingers. I mean, I don't know. I haven't done the math, but it's probably about 60 or 70 different gestures.
Yeah, at least. I mean, and you can use all of them if you want to. Some of them do conflict with the system preferences pane that you mentioned a second ago. So, for instance, I've got one that's 3 fingers down. Well, that was App Expose, which is showing me every window open in Safari. I never used that feature, so I just turned it off in system preferences, so I don't have sort of dual duty going on. But it is astounding how many different gestures he has worked in to this trigger, right? It's just like, it seems so simple. Select a trackpad trigger, and then you open this window, and your mind is blown with how many things you can do.
Okay, but that's not it. So there's more. And one of them is your own custom gesture.
Mm-hmm.
And you use 4 fingers, but you code in the order of them. So if you went pinky, index, ring, middle, you could make that be a gesture. But you get to design it, and you could change change how those 4 fingers tap the screen or tap the touch bar in any sequence you want and make it do something. So that's crazy. And then also force touching. I didn't even mention force touching. Like one of the ones I use is force touching top right of my trackpad takes the current window and makes it on the right half of the screen. Force touching the top left of my trackpad puts the current window on the left side of my screen. So, but you could do that more. You could like the top quadrant for the top right and the bottom right quadrant for the bottom right. I mean, it just, no matter how you want to use your computer, that's a possibility for you.
It's absolutely wild. And I feel like the musician in you likes the finger order tapping. Like it feels like something you would be drawn to.
Yeah, I mean, I was laying in bed last night thinking about it because I've been making a whole bunch of these lately as we prep the show. Anytime we do a show like this, I get even more excited about the app. And I was thinking about some of my favorite jazz songs, like how do I finger, that song on the left hand of the saxophone, because I know in my fingers already how to play that song. Could I set up taps based on different songs that I like to make different things happen? I haven't figured it out entirely yet, but it's in OmniFocus. That is something I'm going to investigate.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't think I have the dexterity for that, but you may be thinking, well, I don't have a fancy Magic Mouse or a Magic Trackpad. I just have a regular mouse, and that's what I use. So I use a trackpad. I've talked about this before, on the left-hand side of my keyboard for panning and zooming and Logic and Final Cut. It's basically all it's there for. And I use a Logitech, an older Logitech Performance MX. They've discontinued it years ago as my mouse. And it's got Logitech software, but it's really bad. This mouse is so old, the software for it isn't Retina. Like, I can't believe it loads in Catalina.
Yeah.
But BetterTouchTool can see all the buttons on this mouse. And so I have the thumb button. I have it, if I click that down, then I get expose where I see all of my open windows and I can select between them. Or I guess mission control now, showing my Mac age a little bit. And so if you have a mouse that maybe the software isn't supported, or if you're like me and like feel a little weird about Logitech software, BetterTouchTool can probably unlock all those buttons on your mouse. Now, it's not going to support everything out there, but the common stuff, the couple of different generations of Logitech mice I have just in my office, it saw all of them, which can kind of unlock some productivity stuff on a regular mouse. You get more if you use the Magic Mouse or Magic Trackpad because those hardware devices are more powerful, like more flexible. But if you're just, using a regular Logitech mouse, you still have a lot of options, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's important to realize that they have two different sets of mouse settings in the application. One is just for the Magic Mouse, which is a touch device on the back of a mouse. And then they call it normal mouse is the thing that will work with Steven's Logitech. Although I want to go back real quick, how you mentioned you keep the trackpad on the left side of your keyboard. I really think this app is ideal for that setup because you're basically using it as a control surface, not as a pointing device.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's all the more reason to put more controls into your control surface. And this is like keyboard shortcuts. You build one or two at a time until you incorporate them. But as you get better at it, you'll learn that. I mean, I wouldn't listen to this show and then go make 20 separate, inputs for your trackpad using BetterTouchTool. Instead, I'd make a list of 20, but I'd just pick two. The two most ones you're going to use most common. Use those until you get really good at them and then start adding more.
I think that's totally fair.
Anyway, for Steven, though, I think someone like Steven should be looking into BetterTouchTool even more so as a device. Like, for instance, when I screencast, one of the things I do is I hit three fingers, tap twice, and it will center the window. So when I'm about to shoot a screencast, it automatically puts the current window in the center.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
And you can do all of these. I think we mentioned this, but I want to circle back to it. Just like a lot of other automation tools, you can have sort of universal triggers that work across all apps, but then you can also have some that just work in specific apps. And so for me, I'll talk about some of the ones that I'm using, take advantage of. I'm already using my trackpad while I edit and having things just for Logic that work in that context. And that's a really powerful thing that once you're in this app and you realize I can make it do different things depending on the app that I'm in, it sort of unlocks a whole different level. And you may not need or may not even want some of these in a lot of the apps that you use. And it lets you really customize it for like your specific workflow. If you're in something like Logic all the time or Photoshop, right? I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but an action is you can set any keyboard shortcut. Well, you can have a bunch of those just for Photoshop that all other apps ignore. So you can really layer these things on over time.
Okay, let's talk about some other triggers, though. One of them is you can draw a picture.
Yeah, you can set up what do they call it? Drawing / mouse gestures. And you draw like the shape of a star or a triangle or circle or something. And then BetterTouchTool watches for that and then uses it as a trigger. I don't know about you. I had real mixed luck with this in my testing. I really couldn't get it to do what I wanted it to do.
I never got this to work reliably. I don't think I draw consistently enough.
Yeah.
So for whatever, I heard from some listeners that actually are very successful with this. I think if you were going to do it, you would want to be like square, triangle. It would be very basic shapes.
Yeah, I think so. And I think my problem was like you. I can't draw at all, really. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
And let alone like on a mouse that I can't see what's happening.
Well, and that's kind of the point of this is it's something you're not looking at. Your trackpad or mouse is not something you're looking at. So drawing on something when you're not even looking at your finger or the mouse itself, that's pretty tough.
Yeah, I think so.
Siri remote. I want to talk about the Siri remote.
Yeah. Do you just have a spare one of these lying around? Like I was thinking about this. It's like the only one I have is in the living room with the Apple TV, and they're really expensive. But you can use it as a trigger device.
Yeah, I feel like Andreas is kind of like James Thompson, where it's almost a stunt. It's like, okay, Apple, you're gonna make a TV control with a touchpad on it. I'm gonna add it to my app.
Yeah. I think a replacement Siri remote is like $60. Like,
Yeah, I
don't
know.
buy one just for this. Don't do it.
Yeah, no, it's probably not the best use of a cereal, but maybe you just got really mad one day at something on the TV and you threw your Apple window out the window and you're at the top of like one of those towers in New York where it fell down
It's a
and
very
crashed into a million
specific
pieces.
use case.
I don't know. I'm working here, brother.
No,
I'm working.
I know. I didn't even realize before this that the Siri remote would pair to a Mac over Bluetooth. Like that thought has never crossed my mind that I should do this, but it does. And the triggers will watch for the various buttons on the remote. So menu, TV, microphone, etc. But then again, it has a touchpad. Now it only sees one finger. So you're not doing like three fingers on the tiny Siri remote, but you can swipe up and down, tap, in any of the corners, tap and hold. So it is available to you if you have a Siri remote floating around. But I agree with you. This exists only because the Siri remote exists and he wanted to have it in his app. I love
it. Do you ever watch the Apple TV app on your Mac?
No. I don't
see. I do, because I'm in my studio all the time, and like I'll put an episode of something on while I'm sitting here scanning documents or whatever. So I actually use my iMac as a TV using the Apple TV app. I haven't thought about that, but I guess I could pair the TV remote to my iMac and then get mad at the remote in my studio as well as my living room. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know. But anyway, moving on. Touch Bar we mentioned on, but Touch Bar is like, that's a whole nother reason to buy this app. I almost feel like he could have put all that functionality into a separate app called BetterTouchTool, and people would have bought that one too.
Yep, I think
but
so.
But he just put it all in the same app.
All
and
in.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time with this on my MacBook Pro. I use a desktop Mac, as do you, so I'm not at a MacBook Pro every day. But I was immediately impressed with what you can do. So on the trigger side, you can create your own personalized buttons that show up on the touch bar. And you can customize them with background color, a name. Over the weekend on Instagram, I made a button that was a yellow button with the hot dog emoji. And when you tapped it, it made it fired the terminal command, say hot dog. So I hit the hot dog button and my MacBook Pro would say hot dog, which my kids loved. They think I'm a genius now. So thanks, BetterTouchTool, for helping me impress my kids.
Yeah, it's hard, but when you do impress them, now the hot dog button needs to stay there for the rest of their childhood.
I know. Yeah, it's like fixed there forever. Those buttons you can put in groups. So if you have a lot of buttons, you can group them together. You can also control what BetterTouchTool does with the control strip, which, if you're familiar with the touch bar, is over on the right-hand side. And it's the one that houses the Siri, expose, volume, brightness, sort of those system controls. And I keep those there. I find those very helpful, but you can have BetterTouchTool hide the control strip and just like banish it and just do all of your own stuff. But I think the real magic here is those buttons where you can have just buttons wherever you need them, firing all sorts of actions, which we're going to talk about in a second. But that is far from the only thing, right? Because there's also widgets, which are incredible.
Yeah, I hold your powder on that. I want to talk about that later because I've gone widget crazy on this laptop. But one of the points Steven made that I really want to emphasize is you can make groups here. So, I mean, you can really turn the touch bar into something very useful just for you. And I think it's like something the more I play with them, more I'm like, how come Apple didn't do this? I mean, this is so obvious now that I can have some widgets on my touch bar.
It's also the first time that I've really wanted the touch bar on a desktop Mac. I'm not a huge fan of the touch bar, but I love the touch bar in terms of automation with BetterTouchTool. And if I if I was going to work on my MacBook Pro all the time, I would have tons of stuff. And I'm going to slowly build that library up over time as I need things. But it would be so great to have some of those on a desktop as well. And, even us fancy Mac Pro users have no touch bar in sight.
Yeah. No, it's something else. Well, we're going to talk about the actions next. First, a word from our sponsor, 1Password. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password, one of the oldest and longest running sponsors of the Mac Power Users, and just an amazing app for protecting your privacy. So now that we're all working at home, we really want to protect our online security. You need an app like 1Password, where all you have to remember is, as the name implies, 1Password. If you type in your 1Password, it takes care of the rest for you. You know, when you go onto websites and they ask you to create a password, just because of the human brain, I guess we just always go back to the 2 or 3 passwords. You know?
Sure.
Maybe Steven's kids, it'll always be hot dog because they remember that cute button on their dad's computer. But either way, you don't want to do that because the bad guys get that 1Password, then they use hot dog on all the websites, your bank, your iTunes account, whatever, and they get in. So 1Password makes strong and unique passwords. They've got a really cool password generator where you can dial in exactly how the password is generated. One of the things you can do is you can say, don't use confusing letters like 0 and capital O. I hate that when I go to type in a password. I don't know which one it is. So that, you can very much customize how it generates the passwords for you. Then it remembers them all for you. But it does so much more than that. The application also has a great way to secure data behind the 1Password vault. You can keep all your credit card information in there. It's on all your devices. And they have plans for your workplace or for your family. I'm a particular fan of the family plan. I talk about it in the show all the time because my family use it all the time. So get your own 1Password installation. One thing I would also recommend if you're working at home is 1Password on their blog. I know this isn't really related to the app, but it's worth talking about at blog.1password.com. They've been publishing some great articles about remote work as we're all kind of dealing with it through this COVID-19 mess. So they've got articles about, prioritizing mental health and minimizing the risk of shadow IT and all the things that you want to work on while you're doing remote work. I would recommend going and checking that out. But also download and install 1Password because it's going to help you out. Now go to 1password.com/MPU, make it in all caps. We need all those caps for you to get the discount, and you get 20% off your family plan. So check it out once again, 1password.com/MPU in all caps. And thank you, 1Password, for all your support of the Mac Power Users. So we were talking about the touch bar and the fact that you can create your hot dog button before the break. Let's just continue there. And I want to explain about these widgets because it's crazy the kind of stuff you can put on your touch bar.
It is. I wonder what your favorite is. I'll share my favorite. It's a tiny rendition of my dock right there on the touch bar.
Yeah,
it's so cool because you can pan across it. If you've used the emoji picker on the touch bar, you're familiar with this, where you can swipe over and it slides really nicely. You can have your dock there, and it is not only surprisingly good looking. That's a really nice looking screen, but it's the first time I've really seen non-Apple stuff on it. I was like, oh, this looks fantastic. And it can save you a trip, especially if you're using multiple displays with your laptop over to your dock. It's just right there at the keyboard.
Yeah. My favorite is Next Event, and it's a widget created by the developer. It puts today's date on it in a very small size. It's like the icon with the date number. And then next to it is the next event on your calendar. And I love, and the time of the next event. So I love seeing what's coming up on me because I block time a lot and I want to keep track of where I am and where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
And not only can you drop this widget on and it puts just a really nice description of the next event on your touch bar, you can program actions based on touching it. And because the widget has 2 elements, it has the date and then it has the event description, you can program actions based on touching the calendar date or touching the event name. So, for instance, I can make it go to Fantastical and just open up the Fantastical for me, or I can make it go to create a new event in Fantastical, depending on which part of the widget that I touch. So it's really powerful, but I just love having my next event available to me. I had a menu bar app that did that for me as well. I think it's called Next Event. We talked about it on the Menu Bar show several months ago, but on my laptop, I actually really like having it on the touch bar. I actually find myself looking down there
Hmm.
as I feel the time, clicking down, thinking, well, what's up next? And I can look down and see it. And that's my favorite.
That's cool. A couple others of note. There is a weather widget that'll give you, current weather data if you don't have a menu bar app that does that. And there's also a app switcher widget. So if you don't want the whole dock and you just want recently running apps, it kind of rebuilds the command tab interface. You can have that as well. And you may think, well, how do I manage the width of these things? Am I going to have collisions? Am I doing a lot of swiping? BetterTouchTool lets you customize how wide each of these widgets, like how much space they'll take up horizontally. So if you want your dock there, but just take up half of it so you have room for other things, you can customize all that. And you hit save and it automatically redraws. So it may take some playing with to get the spacing the way you want it, but it is really customizable. And I think the weather and the app switcher are two good ones to check out as well.
Yeah, and you can put groups on the touch bar so you can contain them if you want. Some others that are interesting is the now playing widget, which shows you what's playing in your music. You've got the ability to run an Apple script slider widget, their shell scripts, and I understand that that's going to get even more powerful as the app moves forward. You've got the developer working on it full time, so the automation stuff's going to go even further. Remaining battery time is also another cool widget you can drop on your screen if you want. And these are very customizable. Like in addition to the next event, there's also just a simple date and time widget. So you can have it display the date and time, but in the customization for the widget, you can set the date format. So like for mine is displaying the short month. So as we record this, it says APR 13. We're recording this on the 13th of April. And then the time in the 24-hour format. That's not the default, but you can go in and change it. So it's very easy to make it work the way you want.
I totally agree with you. This could have been its own app. It is, if you run a touch bar machine, you really should check this out because it is so much better than what Apple supports. And you can even rebuild the control strip deal because it has, playback and brightness and all those other things. But I mean, it really makes what Apple offers seem pretty half done.
Yeah, it makes me. That's why I keep worrying. I don't want to say the Sherlock word on our show because too many people at Apple listen to it. But it's like, how come the Touch Bar didn't ship this way to begin?
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually better because with the way Andres has done it, we can attach our own triggers. Because if Apple did it, it would open the calendar app. It wouldn't open
Right.
Fantastical. And
right.
I couldn't attach an Apple script to it, and I couldn't do all the cool automation stuff that we can do with it as is. So I'm frankly happy that this went down the way it did. But it is also, I think, a secret that people need to know about. Because basically anybody who's got a Touch Bar MacBook should at least give this a try.
100%.
All right, you want to talk about some other actions you can do with this thing?
Yeah, let's get into some of these. And like with triggers, let's start with the keyboard shortcuts actions. You said that you use this some. So how is this improving your day-to-day life?
Well, I mean, if you have a keyboard shortcut that you want to attach to a button, you just type it in. It's that easy. And like, for instance, I trigger a bunch of stuff in Keyboard Maestro based on what I call the hyper key, which is Shift Control Option Command plus a letter. And I've used a tricky method of attaching it to my caps lock key. But I can put those keyboard shortcuts in to run off a BetterTouchTool trigger. So I can trigger a Keyboard Maestro script to perform an action for me. And then Keyboard Maestro unlocks the keys to the kingdom. I can do anything with Keyboard Maestro, literally anything on my Mac. So I talked earlier about having that triple tap. All it's doing is running the Keyboard Maestro hyperkey shortcut to center the current window. It's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, what's cool about this is that it really unlocks pretty much anything on your Mac. And if you do these per application, it means that any gesture, any input can trigger any shortcut in basically any application. And if you layer on top of that Mac OS's built-in functionality to customize keyboard shortcuts. So say that you're in I'll just use Logic again. If you're in Logic and something you use doesn't have a keyboard shortcut, you can make a keyboard shortcut for it in System Preferences and then tell BetterTouchTool, fire that keyboard shortcut in this app when I do this gesture. So you're building these layers on top of each other. And that's how I'm doing a lot of the stuff that I'm going to share when we talk about our BetterTouchTool setups. But it really means that BetterTouchTool can talk to anything on your Mac that is addressable via keyboard shortcut, not just the things that Andreas has programmed it to do, but literally anything.
Yeah, and I mean, it interacts all the way across the board. Like you can control the touch bar with the trackpad. There are touch bar actions where you can open a touch bar group based on something you do on the trackpad. Because I talked about groups earlier. You don't have to take your hand off the trackpad to open the groups. It's crazy. I mean, it's like it starts to feel like, one of those. Have you seen the show where the detective's looking at the board with a ball string pointing at all the different pictures and maps? It starts to feel like that after a while, but it all works for itself, So no matter which direction you want to go at this, you can do it. Another series of actions they have are what they call auxiliary actions. And those are just things that kind of things you need to happen to make this app work better. I talked about this with the Keyboard Maestro. The pause is the most important command in all of Keyboard Maestro, because whenever you're doing automation, sometimes your computer stumbles on its face, like a little kid running downhill. If you don't slow down just a little bit, you're not going to get there. You're going to face plant. Automation will do that. So there's things in here where you can slow down an action or have it pause for a moment or disable a gesture for a few seconds. So there's some auxiliary actions. Those are things you can do. And you can chain these together. I guess I should have said that at the beginning. When you have a trigger, it's not just one thing. Like we talked earlier about a touch bar action being open the calendar and then open Fantastical. But I could actually have it do multiple things. I could have it open Fantastical and then hit the keyboard shortcut for weak view, if maybe I just want to always jump to weak view whenever I tap that button on the touch bar. And then it's because it's automation tool, it can automate itself. There's a whole series of BetterTouchTool related actions. So you can use one of these triggers to restart the app if you're having trouble with the app. You can jump to the preferences. This is kind of meta stuff, but it's cool that it's there. And then there's also a thing called name triggers. And name triggers it's like a macro language where you can create your own triggers for use in other locations. So you could create a trigger and save that and then use it later as part of a different automation. It's almost like nesting automation. You can do it mouse clicks. We talked about all the things you can do to touch the trackpad to trigger something, but you can equally do a bunch of actions of triggering things. So like a trigger can be do a left click on the mouse or a right click or a middle click or a command click or a double click. It's a whole series of mouse triggers that you can do based on some trigger you press in BetterTouchTool. So for instance, you could map to a touch bar button something that clicks the mouse. And so people listening are going, this is getting ridiculous and stupid, but not really. If you're doing automation, maybe there's something you do all the time over and over again, that could actually be really helpful for you.
And you can even set it to do like clicks with keyboard shortcuts. And there's an accessibility angle there as well, that if it's difficult for someone to maybe do Command Option click for some reason, you can make that a 3-finger tap on the trackpad. So if you have those sorts of problems you need solving, BetterTouchTool again unlocks capability that is not there in Apple's built-in accessibility programs, but can be really helpful for a lot of types of people.
Here's one you can do with Keyboard Maestro, but also equally with BetterTouchTool is, in addition to clicking the mouse, you can move the mouse to a certain location, or you can save the mouse at its current location. So let's say you go to some website, and if you keep let's say you keep your Safari window on the right half of your screen. So the mouse knows exactly on the screen where to go to push this button and that button. You could save those locations and make let's say a touch bar action where you tap the touch bar. It opens the URL, goes to that location, does a single click, pauses, goes to a different place on the screen and does another click. And things that you would sit there, the times when you have to do something for work or something where you end up going to the same page all the time and clicking the button over and over again, and you want to like bang your head against the desktop.
Yeah.
I haven't actually gone down the rabbit hole in this one. This is something I've done with Keyboard Maestro more, but this is absolutely doable with this tool set because they've got save location, move to location, and they've also got restore mouse to original position. So you could run that whole thing and then add the clicks in that I was just talking about, and you could do a whole mouse automation. Crazy stuff, man.
It is wild. And I think the save and restore mouse position is really, really powerful. And that's something that we talked about in the Keyboard Maestro episode as well. And what's interesting to me is how differently these apps kind of approach that. All sorts of stuff. Toggle between big and normal cursor is another nice one. If you shake the cursor I think it started in El Capitan, maybe the cursor gets big.
Yeah, if you lose it, if you shake it, it gets bigger.
Yeah, and if you have multiple displays, like some people, I won't say who, then you may need to do that all the time. Well, you could just do that to a 3-finger gesture somewhere, and not have to sort of shake your mouse back and forth like some sort of accident waiting to happen. The mouse flies off the desk.
Yeah, there's another one to hide the mouse cursor, which as I look at this, I'm like, I need to incorporate that into my center screen, because if I'm going to center the screen for a screencast, why not hide the mouse cursor at the same time?
Yeah, that'd be great. That's not floating around your screenshots, like moving around erratically. Just get rid of it.
Yeah, nice. And then there's a whole series, and I think this is really one of the bigger payoff action sections is the control of applications. So the obvious one is open an application. I already talked about the one I do with Fantastic. I'll just open the app. But there's a lot more than that. You can send a shortcut to a specific app. You can trigger menu bar items in an application. So like if you want to go to Safari and save as PDF, you could add that to an action. Anything that's in a menu bar, you can automate through this. You can also hit the contextual menu in an application. You can have it just show the menu bar as opposed to select something in the menu bar. There's just so much you can activate, you can hide. And then there's a bunch of scripting actions, JavaScript, AppleScript. You can run any of those scripts from the application or even execute terminal commands. Starts getting scary then,
Like a button on your touch bar runs, some wild terminal command. That's how I did the hot dog. It's like just say in a word and the terminal will speak. And, you don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops if you just want to fire off a script. And what is cool about this is you can do so much of what BetterTouchTool does without ever touching the scripting stuff. But if you do want to go further, it's available to you. You don't have to also run some sort of script utility. You can do all of this in one place.
There's a game I play with my kids where I open the Apple script editor and I just run the command say, and I put words in quotes. And I have my computer talk to them,
Oh, yeah.
It's like, David thinks you should clean your room right now. And then they start arguing with my computer and I start arguing back. It's just like a goofy thing. And my kids are older now. But we started this when they were young and we still do it to this day. But you could add those. So you could do it in a terminal command or you could do it in Apple script. But all that stuff is possible. If you're a fan of the automator workflows, you can run automator workflows as well.
There's also a bunch of actions for screenshots. And of course, in Mojave or Catalina, it's hard to remember what comes when, they reworked the screenshot system. Yeah. But if you want even more control, you don't like the way that Apple's doing it, there are screenshot actions as well. And so what is neat about this is that it has its own set of options that you can enable in the screenshot section. And so you could say capture and edit screenshot video, but because you can build these actions on top of each other, you can move that screenshot around automatically. You could have it be renamed based on something, or you can say, I don't like Apple shortcuts. I just want to do it with a single swipe or something to give you, again, greater flexibility around the screenshot tools. And that was in Mojave. I've been told. By that I mean I looked it up quietly.
Yeah.
but it's pretty neat to consider something that is built into the system and you don't really like the way that it works. You can just change it.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of the system, they also have a whole host of system tools, all the usual suspects: mission control, launchpad, dashboard. Dashboard, man. What about dashboard?
It's gone. Rest in peace.
Yeah. So I guess if you've got an older Mac or you're running on an older operating system, you would get dashboard. But show desktop, notification center, you can turn do not disturb on or off. That'd be another good one. I'm building out my screencasting one as we talk here. I could turn on do not disturb at the same time that I center the window and do the other stuff and hide the mouse. You can toggle between dark mode and, that goofy system that Mac OS 10, I guess it's not Mac OS 10 anymore. It's Mac OS uses to split the windows where it locks them into a screen.
Oh, yeah.
I've already said my piece about that. Not a fan. But you can also move between spaces. It's just, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do there. And there's a Start Siri one as well, although I'm not a fan of triggers for Siri other than the built-in one already. Siri talks enough. We don't need any more.
Yeah, I rarely use it on my Mac at all. I have it up in the menu bar, but I took it off the control strip on my MacBook Pro because I would hit it accidentally all the time.
Every time you hit the delete key.
Yeah. And so that is banished for me. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't want to bring Siri into my automation. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by TextExpander from our friends at Smile. Talking a lot about automation in this episode, and TextExpander is a key pillar in my automation strategy, not just on my Mac, but on iOS devices as well. If you type something more than 3 times, make it a snippet and let TextExpander type it for you. Things like your email address or address, but even things that are a lot more complicated. So one thing I have to do is I make wire payments to a lot of Relay FM hosts, and I have to put their names in a very specific format to wire them internationally. And it's not easy to remember because the formatting is strange. I just made a TextExpander snippet where I type a snippet, I get a drop-down menu, I select the person I'm sending it to, and then let TextExpander fill out that form on the bank website. So I know I'm not going to make any errors. I'm not having to copy and paste from a Google Doc or something like that. TextExpander makes it a whole lot easier. Smile hosts webinars each month to learn more about TextExpander. Whether you're a beginner or a pro or somewhere in between, they have something for you to learn about boosting your productivity. Those are over on the TextExpander website at textexpander.com/webinar. TextExpander is available for macOS, Windows, Chrome, iPhone, and iPad, so your snippets are with you wherever you go. Show listeners will get 20% off their first year by visiting textexpander.com/podcast to learn more and sign up. Once again, that's textexpander.com/podcast for 20% off. Our thanks to TextExpander and Smile for sponsoring the show.
Yeah, there's a couple more sets of actions. I mean, and we aren't actually going to talk about them all on this episode because there's so many, but a couple categories I'd like to also include. One is the space navigation, moving left or right on space, but you can also have it move to a specific desktop. And I find this kind of useful. Because I am a single monitor man these days, I don't know if you listened to the prior show, but I had to give up my extra monitors because we've got a bunch of people in the house. We needed them. But so I find myself using multiple desktops, but I do have in my head different work phases for different desktops. So jumping from desktop 1 to 4 is actually something that makes a lot of sense for me. And you can do that with this app.
Yeah, because now it's all linear, right? So you would go 1, 2, 3, 4, and it takes you more time, slower.
Yeah. You can also automate moving the current app to a specific desktop. So like if I've got, let's say desktop 4 is for legal contracts and I'm working on a Word doc, I can create a trigger with BetterTouchTool to send that Word document to desktop 4. It's great. Do you use multiple desktops, Stephen? I think we talked about this.
I don't. I have one, and then I have music full screen to the right.
Yeah, I keep Fantastical in the 14-day view and full screen, and also music full screen. But I'm getting to where I use quite a few now. So,
and it's cool that BetterTouchTool addresses this because I find so much of the mission control experience frustrating because you're like dragging and dropping. And if you miss it, then you've created music and Finder side by side and no one needs that. And
Yeah.
this is one that I'm going to explore more after the show because it may be that my frustration is what's kept me away, not the actual feature itself.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about, I think on State of the Mac, the poor state of the built-in kind of split screen multitasking stuff on the Mac. It needs a lot of work. You can kind of work your way around it with a tool like this where you design yourself. And there's some additional features we'll talk about in a minute that even make that more possible. Another category of tools or actions you have are system actions. Sleep, the computer, sleep display, log out. You can create new files, you can empty the trash, all that, show hidden folders. So all the kind of system stuff you think you can script through BetterTouchTool. And then they've also got a category called utility actions, which is just a catch-all. And there's so much you can do in here. Like you can turn Bluetooth off or turn it on, or toggle the display mirroring or AirPlay, or you can show the emoji symbol or the color picker. I use that color picker all the time in stuff I'm doing. And sometimes I just want it to appear. I think I'm going to actually add a button to the touch bar on my laptop for this because I just want the color picker. And it's like you're in an app and you're like hunting around for a way to make it show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, BetterTouchTool brings so many parts of macOS that aren't easily gettable. Talking about toggling Bluetooth or Do Not Disturb or something. That's a trip to the menu bar, right? And then finding in the drop down where it is. And if you do those sorts of things a lot, or more importantly, if you find yourself doing those things a lot in certain circumstances, BetterTouchTool can be a real useful thing. Like in my previous job, I was in a lot of meetings. And so every time I'd be like, okay, plug into the projector, turn off mirroring, make sure that Do Not Disturb is on. And with BetterTouchTool, I could have just had a button that said meeting time and push the button on my touch bar, and all those things happen automatically for me. And I think if you're in that sort of situation where you're changing mode or context with your Mac, look at some of these system actions, because I think they could save you a lot of fiddly stuff, right? And it's the one time you forget to do one of those things where it becomes a problem, right? We've all been there, and I think it can really speed up sort of just a lot of the point and hunt and clicking that we all have to do as Mac users.
Yeah, and if I could tie it to a tap on the touch bar that matches Dizzy Gillespie's Salt Peanuts right before I talk, that'd be great, right? I'm going to have fun with this.
You mentioned the window snapping. I like to talk a little bit about that. Like I said, I don't use multiple spaces. And the way that macOS does this is basically the way the iPad does it, where like I have two apps full screen side by side, but the desktop's not behind them, right? They are full screen apps. And that's not what I want, but there are a lot of times where I want two Safari windows open, one on the left, one on the right. For instance, preparing the show document, right? I had our show notes on the left, and my right Safari window was full of resources, right? So watch YouTube videos of people doing stuff, reading through the documentation, reading through the forums. And BetterTouchTool has really great window snapping features. It's extremely customizable. So I, for instance, wanted a little bit of space in between the windows and some space around the dock. And so I have it a gap above the dock, and then I made the left window 49% and the right window 50%. So I have a little bit of my desktop shining through. They don't quite touch, and it gives me a little more breathing room. I can click into the Finder if I need to between the windows. And it's really easy. Just you can drag the window into one of the edges of the screen. It shows you the space it'll fill. And there's an option, and I really recommend this, to restore old window size if the window is dragged away. So if I drag it out of that space, it will go back to the size and window ratio that it was before. And so when I'm done with this, I don't want my Safari window just to be sort of the same, as it normally is. I can drag it back out, and it will go back to that size that I prefer. This has been super useful for me. I've gone through a lot of these tools over the years, and I think BetterTouchTool does it the way that my brain thinks about it the best.
Yeah, I do this with two different apps. I use Keyboard Maestro to do it with keyboard shortcuts. And I've got a whole system for that. But if I've got my hand on the mouse, I use a BetterTouchTool snapping to size them. And like you, I've gone and customized it. I do like a little padding around the windows and because I'm a nerd, I've gone through and dialed it in just the way I want it. But it's really useful, and it's way more powerful than the typical window resizing applications.
And if this is something that you want and you don't need the other automation stuff, this is a set of features that he's broken out into its own app. There are some slight differences between the two, like the deal where you can say, I want the left one to be 49% and the right one 50%. Doesn't have that option. But the overlap is basically complete other than that. So that's called BetterTouchTool if you are looking just for a good window manager. But I think for the price, it's silly not to check out everything else this app can do.
At a minimum, it's $7.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to write him and say, man, you got to raise
I totally agree. This utility should cost more.
Yeah, I mean, I want this app to exist for many years. Anyway, so window snapping is a whole different set tool, and also navigating spaces and desktops, like I was talking about earlier, is another kind of additional feature set I would say that you get with this app.
There's also BetterTouchTool Remote, which is an iOS or iPadOS app. This kind of falls in line with, we spoke about this with Alfred. Alfred has a iPhone utility as well that has, it basically becomes a remote control for your Mac. And with BetterTouchTool Remote, you get system controls, so brightness, etc. You have a trackpad, but you can also use it as a trigger. So you can have actions fired from your phone. So what I think about is, am I using a Mac Mini as an entertainment computer, right? I hook it to my TV and I don't necessarily want a keyboard and mouse somewhere floating around. You could build media actions, open this app, make it full screen, play this file, all right from your phone. And it's pretty amazing turning your iPhone into like a really powerful remote for your Mac.
I couldn't think of a use for this, so thanks for coming up with one.
Yeah, I think the media thing is what I would use it for the most. And honestly, our use of a Mac Mini as a as a media machine has really dwindled over the years. But it's cool, and if you have purchased BetterTouchTool, then it's free to use this. So you can go check that out. It's in the iOS App Store.
Yeah, see, that felt to me like just a step above the Apple TV remote interaction. It's like, oh, okay, I could make an app to control too. Well, then I'm going to do that. I think Keyboard Meister did the same thing, and I don't know. When I'm sitting at my computer, thinking to pull my phone out of my pocket to trigger an automation doesn't seem like make a lot of sense. But I guess you're right. If it's a headless Mac, it actually could be useful.
Yeah. Yeah, or it could be like a home server, or maybe you're presenting and your Mac isn't right in front of you, or some sort of media environment. I think there's a lot of ways that Mac Minis end up without a display attached.
Yeah.
And if you have that, this is probably the simplest way to get around some of those limitations.
BetterTouchTool, come for the automation, stay for the window management.
I like that. That's good.
There we go, man. You can have that one for free.
That's good. So what are some of the ways that you're using it?
So I like I said, I've been using it a lot more the last couple of weeks because I had fallen in the habit. Like I've got a tab sequence I use for switching tabs in Safari that I've been using so long with BetterTouchTool I don't even think about it. And it's great because in Safari, I never seem to be able to get the keyboard shortcut under my fingers for switching between tabs. And I usually have my finger on the trackpad when I'm looking at web pages because I'm moving around with the mouse. So that's just second nature for me. It's 2+1 on either side. I think they call it a tip tap. And then on the other thing I do is I set up for screen recording. I talked earlier about centering windows. The other thing I often do, because there is no better way to do this than to record the screen off a iPhone or iPad, I record those into QuickTime because all the apps that try and do it don't seem to stay connected, and QuickTime is rock solid. But it's a whole sequence. You got to open the app. You got to push a keyboard. There's a whole bunch of stuff you have to do to get that recording started. And I have that built into also a BetterTouchTool trigger that I do with my fingers on the trackpad. I talked earlier about the hot corners I use for window management. I've got so many different ways to manage windows, and the trackpad stuff works really good.
Yeah, it's cool.
On touch bar customizations, I have on the far left the current date in a format that I like, and then I have the weather, and then I have the next event. And then on the right side, I've been playing with the series of buttons. I think I'm going to make some nested actions on the touch bar. This is actually, I'm having more fun with the touch bar now than I have had since it started, But I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to do with the remaining real estate. I am, however, leaving Apple's control strip in because occasionally I do need to go in and have it be a function key.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think the ability to have those side by side is spectacular. That BetterTouchTool can take over the touch bar if you want it to, but it doesn't have to. And I agree with you. I've left the control strip there because I think it's just, I've kind of internalized, hit the brightness and swipe. I've kind of internalized that gesture with my right hand. But I do want it to be more useful than just that. So having them side by side totally works for me.
I also am taking advantage of BetterTouchTool on app-specific applications. Like I spend a lot of time in ScreenFlow, like you spend a lot of time in Logic. So I've got various touch-related actions in ScreenFlow because my hands are always on the trackpad when I'm working in ScreenFlow. And a bunch of like customize or menu items or exports, just a bunch of different things I do in ScreenFlow that always annoy me because they take a lot of taps or very specific clicks. I've automated those with BetterTouchTool, and they only run when I'm in that application.
Yeah, that's cool. For me, like I said, this is the first window snapping tool that really works the way I want it to and gives me the customization that I want. Moom and others are fantastic, and I've tried, believe me, all of them. But this is the one that's really stuck for me. You can even customize like what the overlay looks like. So it shows you an outline of where your window is going to be. It'll show you, what that looks like. You can customize that. It's spectacular. And I mentioned that I'm using it a lot in Logic, and I'm using it with the trackpad and the keyboard shortcut action. Now, I could do it also as a menu bar action. Obviously there's overlap in some of these. But one of the things I do a lot, of course, is cut a section of audio where the playhead is. So where the play point is, make a cut there. That's Command T in Logic. But if I'm panning over with my trackpad, then I've got to move my hand from the trackpad to the mouse, hit Command T, and then go back, right? And if I do that hundreds of times a week, that adds up to time and it's a lot of movement. And so I have set 3-finger swipe down. Again, that would conflict with the system preference for app expose, but I've turned that off. And it now means whatever region I'm in at the playhead in Logic, it just makes a cut. The other thing I do a lot of is select all following. So if I make a cut, I want to select all the audio after that cut so I can move it forward. I have that set to Shift F. This is one that I'm not positive that's an actual Logic shortcut, or I've just made it a Logic shortcut because I've used Logic for such a long time now. But I have 3-finger tap set up for that. So now if I want to cut, select, and drag, my hand doesn't have to leave the trackpad. And I have found myself relying on the keyboard shortcuts much, much less frequently in Logic. And I'm sure some of our listeners are like this too. Sometimes when you move between a mouse and a keyboard a lot, it's actually kind of hard to get the keyboard shortcut right. And for me, like Command T, I can usually hit it, but if I hit Command G or Command Y, like some of those do other things in Logic. And this has really kept me from making erroneous keyboard shortcuts in Logic. I've got another one that's a 4-finger double tap to insert a chapter marker, because that keyboard shortcut I can never remember. And it's like kind of around some others on the keyboard that do things I don't want to do in Logic. And so for me, as someone who's in Logic hours a week, it has really sped up my work and made it less error prone, which is really important to me.
Yeah. One of the things I really like about your cut shortcut, the swipe down with 3 fingers, is it logically makes sense, like
Yeah.
a cut, like swiping down, just like in the applications, like I believe it's scissors that point down
Mm-hmm.
as the icon. So it kind of like in your brain can make sense. And I think that's a really good tip. If you're setting this up, try to pick gestures that kind of make sense with the tool you're doing. I mean, just like you swipe to the right if you want to go to, one direction for the tab, or swipe to the left for a different direction. Things like that. Try and bring some just basic logic in it, because just assume future you isn't going to necessarily going to remember all the details. Make it as easy on yourself as possible.
Oh, totally.
And that kind of gets back to the thing of, don't do 20 of these. Just do a couple, get them down, and then do some more. Don't try and do this all at once.
Yeah, because you can really spend so much time doing this, and then if you can't remember them, you're going to make yourself a little mad, right? And so this gives you the ability to have what you need when you need it, and not totally ruin your brain.
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Squarespace. Make your next move and enter offer code MPU at checkout to get 10% off your first purchase. Squarespace lets you easily create a website for your next idea with a unique domain and award-winning templates and more. So maybe you want to create an online store, a portfolio, or a blog. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform that lets you do just that. There's nothing to install. There's no patches to worry about, no upgrades needed. You don't have to worry about that stuff. Squarespace has got it covered, and they have award-winning 24/7 customer support if you need any help. They let you quickly and easily grab a unique domain, so you don't even need to go elsewhere for that. And all of the award-winning templates are beautifully designed for you to show off your great ideas. And not only are the templates beautiful, they're very customizable. I have both my MacSparky website and my legal website built through Squarespace. I started with one of the templates, and then I just started making little changes just to make it the way I want, and I'm very happy with the way both of those websites look. They look professionally made, even though they were done by me. And it wasn't too expensive. You can get a plan started for just $12 a month. And you can start a trial with no credit card required by going to squarespace.com/MPU. Everybody has a reason for a website, whether, maybe you have got a baby on the way, or maybe your church needs a new website, or maybe your soccer team does. You can go on Squarespace and get started for very little money and have a very professional website. It's all responsive design, so the stuff you make is going to look good, whether it's viewed on a little iPhone screen or a big 27-inch monitor. And when you decide to sign up, use the offer code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain, and to just show your support for us here at the Mac Power Users. Once again, that's squarespace.com/MPU and the code MPU to get 10% off your first purchase. Thank you, Squarespace, for your support of this show and all of Relay FM. Squarespace, make your next move, make your next website.
All right. Do we want to talk some about what our listeners are doing and what they've shared in the forums?
Oh, yeah. Just for giggles, I put up a post in the forum saying, hey, we're going to make this show, you guys. What do you like? And we got some great ideas from listeners. Rosemary Orchard, co-producer of the show practically. She helps run the forums, and she's a big friend of the show. And she uses a snapping. I didn't realize this until just this week. Rose sent me a picture of her work setup. She's got a 34-inch wide screen.
Oh, yeah. She's one of those.
Yeah. It's like she gets lost in that screen. Anyway, so she needs to split the screen, not in just half, but she splits it in thirds, and she does all that with snapping with BetterTouchTool. Listener Dustin totally redid his menu bar. I'm sorry, not his menu bar, his touch bar. And he gave a nice image of it. He's using a bunch of stuff. He created a button to launch 1Password. He also put in a button for floating. What's that feature where you float the video out of Safari?
Picture in picture.
Picture in picture. What a great idea to put that on the touch bar. I'm gonna copy that idea. He also has the now playing thing. So he's gone through and really customized it. But a listener, Sam Kell, I think wins the prize. Sam gets a gold star. I'm not even going to talk about all the stuff he did because he did so much, but he did a whole bunch of stuff based on applications. One of the ones I thought was clever is in Skype. He does a 4-finger pinch to mute his microphone.
That's cool.
And then a 4-finger spread to unmute it, which is a great idea if you've got a microphone that will work that way. And then another one I thought that was clever was in OmniFocus, Outlook, Excel, and Safari. He uses a three-finger click to activate the Keyboard Maestro palette. So now we're totally combining automation here. You may recall from the Keyboard Maestro show, Keyboard Maestro has the ability to run palettes or a list of tools on the screen based on various applications or groupings. So he triggers those with a three-finger click, and it's dependent on the app he's in. Did I say 2 gold stars? I think Sam gets 3 gold stars.
I think 3 gold stars goes out.
Yeah. Anyway, he's got a bunch of cool tricks. I thought that was really fun. And, a lot of people are using it for text expansion. There's a lot here. So if you're on the forums, go in and look at these. The listeners really delivered the goods here.
One thing we haven't touched on yet are some sort of miscellaneous features and maybe features that are coming in the future to BetterTouchTool. One of those is sync. So if you run multiple Macs and you go to BetterTouchTool settings, there's a sync option. It syncs either with Dropbox or iCloud Drive. But in big red letters, it says, "This is experimental. Create a backup of your settings before activating sync." It's been fine for me syncing between my laptop and my desktop, but it is in beta. We want to make sure that's clear. But if you do run multiple Macs, you can sync over your settings between the two of them.
Yeah, he's really getting into more automation. JavaScript, AppleScript, Shell script, all that stuff is going to get supported even more. He's also working on making dynamic text for the menu bar icon so you can display custom things in your menu bar. That sounds like fun.
That's really cool. Make it say, "Hi, David."
Yeah, exactly. Or like if you wanted to put more details about upcoming events or, did your baseball team win today? The other thing that is interesting, this is just kind of falls into the category of the Apple TV remote support. He's going to put gamepad support in. So
he is a disciple of James Thompson.
Yeah, because why not have an Xbox controller next to your Mac and I don't know, hit the A-B combo, maybe hit a Mario Kart combo, cheat combo, and I don't know, something on your Mac.
Restarts Finder. I love that.
Although it would be kind of interesting if you could control a browser with the thumbsticks and
fantastic.
Then attach print screen to some buttons. I don't know. I could see you kind of doing something with it. I could also see that being an interesting option if you had a Mac Mini connected to a TV.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. This app does a lot. I guess we've waxed on about it long enough here.
So you talked a little bit about how you use this.
Yeah.
With Keyboard Maestro. If someone is, sort of wondering about the overlap or where the big differences are, where do you think that sort of comes down?
I think, Keyboard Maestro is very powerful. Keyboard Maestro is not necessarily something you use to automate your trackpad and mouse with. I mean, I in my head, and I know there's people, because I saw the users in the forums that are doing this, but in my head, really, BetterTouchTool is the tool that I use to automate based on these input devices, and Keyboard Maestro is the app that I use to glue together crazy things. I mean, I use Keyboard Maestro to write contracts, and I can't really see myself doing that with this app, but they certainly can work together because once you create a Keyboard Maestro keyboard-based shortcut, you can trigger it with all these various touch interfaces. So I think they work together very well, but there's room in my heart for both.
I totally agree with that. They obviously do similar things. A lot of the actions are overlapping in big ways, but I think it's all about the input device that you want to use and what you want to use for each action. There's no problem running these side by side in your Mac's menu bar whatsoever.
Yeah, I think this app is ideal if you have a trackpad and you'd like to get more out of it. It's ideal if you would like to get more out of your mouse, whether it's an Apple mouse or a third-party mouse. And I think it's almost a must-have if you've got a touch bar and you want to actually make it work for you.
Totally.
All right. Well, we've got a great thread. We'll link the thread with all the BetterTouchTool tips from the listeners in the show notes, so you can go check those out. And also, there's always a thread for each show as it publishes, so you can share some of your BetterTouchTool tips there and let us know what you think. Thanks to our sponsors today, and that's our friends over at Eero, 1Password, Smile, and Squarespace. We're the Mac Power Users. You can find us at relay.fm/MPU. You can find the forums at talk.macpowerusers.com. We've got a great newsletter, gang. If you like the show and you want to get the show links in your inbox, maybe we usually put some other stuff in that newsletter too. It goes out every week, just a few minutes after the show publishes. Now that we got that figured out, so sign up for that. There's a link in the show notes for that as well. Did I miss anything, Stephen?
Sounds good to me.
All right. We'll see you next week.